Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
From time to time, of course, we have a lot of authors, and we love authors, but from time to time, I find an author who is so, I would say, so powerful in his or her descriptions of violence, which I don't usually like violence, but I liked yours because it had a lot of good, kind things in there. It wasn't just pure murder and bad people, you know.
Thank you.
and so I'm going to ask you as an author, why? Of course, you're from Cuba, and I'm going to ask you can tell us about that. But let's answer this question. You seem like such a nice man. Why did you decide to do all these murder books?
Well, I guess I have an alter ego, and I have spent basically all my life, working life, was in the financial business, traveling throughout the Americas, Central, South America, visited Mexico, lived there, lived in Venezuela.
You saw a lot of bad things happening, didn't you?
Some, and of course there was the revolution in Cuba. I was a child, but I got to see it. It happened while I was there. So yes, I have to admit that I've seen some violence. Of course, some of it's my own interpretation or exaggeration of things that I may have seen, and I got to go over the top in my writing.
Well, okay, let's go back to Cuba, because now, of course, Cuba's the hot subject.
Yes, it is.
And I've lived in Miami all my life, and I've loved Cuba. And I was so sad when Castro came in, but I was so glad when we thought that now that we could make it part of our own Americas again. Yes. But tell us about what you remember growing up in Cuba.
Well, I was a young boy. I remember the day or the night that the revolution triumphed. All of a sudden, we were seeing 2 or 3, 4 rebel soldiers arriving into town, and people following them, and an exuberant crowd, just going along. It was interesting because all the rebels at that time, they all wore rosaries on their necks. Yes.
Really?
Yes, they all did, or at least the ones I saw, they were wearing them. So it was a very peculiar situation. It has been said before, and I think it can be said again, that the Cuban Revolution was a political revolution. It wasn't to liberate the downtrodden or the very poor people, because the support was, I would say, almost universal. But I do remember my father's comments January 1st, because as a child, you get excited about seeing guns and young people and the whole charisma of what had transpired. And I remember sitting at the lunch table, and I made some comments, and my father said, well, let's hope that the changes that are coming are not going to be bad. And so I think he was foreshadowing what eventually happened. And of course, as time went by, things began to change. There was intimidation. My mother, who was very religious, Catholic, she would be searched before she went to church, body search, before she went inside the church. And some of us, when Bay of Pigs happened, I was still there, and some of my friends were captured and put away in a movie theater where they had, hundreds of people incarcerated in the movie theater because they were afraid they would go against the revolution. I was lucky. I I wasn't taken. My father and mother took precautions and sent me away to a farm for a couple of days, and so nothing happened.
But now, so how did you come to the United States?
Well, then later in 1961, I think it was around August of that year, my parents were afraid of my indoctrination, and so they chose to get out, but they couldn't. So I was sent out.
You were able to get out?
Yes.
Without your parents?
Right. I was basically 14, 15 years old at the time. There was this Peter Pan, I think you may have heard of it, the movement. Catholic Charities started it, where children who were unaccompanied by their parents or other adult were taken in and either put in an orphanage or in someone's home. I was lucky because I had family. And so I ended up going to Philadelphia for over a year. My parents still couldn't get out. And later on, I went to live in New Jersey, in Elizabeth, New Jersey, where there was a large community from my hometown. So I had lots of friends there. And so I went to high school, and I worked in a factory at night. And so I did that until I finished high school, and then I started college, and I basically did the same thing. In the meantime, after about 5 or 6 years, my parents got out. So we were reunited eventually.
So that's a great story. And did you always know that you wanted to be a writer? Because you're very good. I mean, your words, you carry people up and down and to the side and to the left. I mean, this is not casual. I don't know how you sleep at night.
Well, let's say that I have fluid imagination, if I may say that. I really thought that I wanted to become a doctor as a child. Then when I was here and I was working, going to school and working, I would look at the paper, and they always had jobs for accountants and bookkeepers, and there were long lines. So and at the time, I think I was working at a gas station, dealing with messy things. And I thought, well, maybe that's what I'm going to do, since I can probably do that. And so I started college, and I got my degree, my bachelor's degree from Rutgers University in accounting. And but then I realized that wouldn't be enough, that if I really wanted to go up in the business world, I really should have my master's degree. So I went to Seton Hall. And but it wasn't really my chosen profession. I mean, I was good at it. As a matter of fact, I think many times I was called as a CFO or as a finance executive, I was very unorthodox because they thought I could be a salesman because of my extroverted behavior. So, and that's what I did. I worked for some major companies, Black & Decker, Ingram Micro, Young & Rubicon. So I have had, a plethora of business experience. And I basically, the only country I never got to visit throughout my years is actually Bolivia. But every other country in Latin America I have been to, except I should not exclude the Ghanas. There's the French and the Dutch and the English, I guess. I'm not sure. But anyway, I haven't been to those three little countries, or Bolivia. But yes, I've been Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina, Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil, Costa Rica, Guatemala, El Salvador. There's not one country I haven't seen.
Okay, so, but it's obvious that you were never a drug dealer, and you're not that kind of a person. How did you do How did you get the information? Or you just imagine what that was like?
Funny enough, you do read. If you I do read a lot, and of course, going to some of those countries, I remember on one occasion I actually was in Bogota, Colombia, and I was picked up at the airport by the local controller, the CFO. I was his boss, and we get to the hotel, which was a very one of the top hotels in Bogota at the time, called I believe Tequendama, and I was very surprised about how strong the security was there. How over the top. There was a guy, a policeman or a soldier with a dog going around, and there was another one with a long pole and had a mirror underneath, looking inside underneath the car, opened the luggage compartment, and I thought, wow, this security is really pretty good. Well, the next day, I go to the office and I sit down with the general manager, and I think he didn't mean to say it, but he did. He said, well, I was going to go to pick you up, but there was a bomb threat because the family of Escobar is staying at the condos which are right next to the hotel. And so he sent the controller in case the bomb was, and I thought, well, if the bomb had exploded, I would have been gone too, right? So then I started reading about Pablo Escobar, and then just, eventually the seed that had been planted germinated, and I started writing. And I think my first draft of that book, Justified Retribution, was more than 1,000 pages long. And of course, I because I didn't know what I was doing. Okay. And so, I just
have
went
to
on
tell
and on.
everybody it's down, though, to 469.
I started taking some courses in writing. I'm sorry, at Miami-Dade College, and then I learned some of the things that, as a writer, you want to expose and propose. So, and of course, I think part of the reason why I wrote was for my own fulfillment, my own enjoyment.
Right.
Not really thinking of a financial or monetary reward, just that I wanted to spend some of my hours I have been working. I had reached a point in my life when I had an unexpected and unwelcome visit by the big C.
Oh, my.
Yes, I was 65, so I thought, well, maybe I should retire. I had colorectal cancer. It was totally unexpected. I had a colonoscopy a few months before, so the doctor, when she saw me, she didn't think there was anything major wrong. Maybe I was lactose intolerant, or maybe I had irritable bowel syndrome. But, the condition didn't subside. So finally I said, what's going on? I says, well, I'm not really worried because you had a colonoscopy 8 months ago, but let's talk to the gastroenterologist. And so I did. And the partner, who was the one who could see me on a rush basis, or the other fellow, this was back in September, and the other fellow couldn't see me like until November, so this guy could see me in October. So I said, well, I'll go to his associate. And I described my condition. I didn't have any pain. I didn't have any blood. Just that something wasn't right. So he decided he wanted to do another colonoscopy, and they discovered that I had a tumor. And then, I says, well, you have a tumor. We're going to do a biopsy and come back call my secretary, come back to set up an appointment in 2 weeks. And 2 days later, his secretary is calling me to tell me that they want to see me. So I knew that this wasn't good news. And so I went through a heck of a situation, radiation and chemo for 3 or 4 months. And then in January of 2010, they said, "You're cured."
Wonderful.
And
Wonderful.
here I am.
Wonderful.
And
but you hadn't written like this before, right?
No. And so after that, I started writing more. I mean, I had already written some sort of, draft, but then I started concentrating on doing more. And, of course, then I started trying to get my health back because I had become a weakling. I had dropped to about 130 pounds. So I was, a walking cadaver, sort of. But little by little, I started getting my health back. And as I said, here I am.
But I think also maybe you had something in your mind for the future, which was very important when you are ill, that you don't give up. Because you say, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to write books. That's what I'm going to do because I got a lot in my mind," right?
Well, I had an interesting conversation. I spoke to upstairs, and I said, "Well, Lord, if it's my time, I'm okay. If you want me to go, I'll go. However, if you don't think that the time is arrived yet, then help me get over this."
So the word came out, right? Well, and the interesting thing is, see, when I read books like this to figure out if we're going to use it and do a review is, I go through the first 2 chapters. Well, the first chapter just pulled me right in. This poor little kid, is being, they're in this desperate condition with the nanny and this the little boy was a boy, little boy,
yes.
Right? And then it, of course, leads us to why they're being followed and someone's trying to kill them, and then, of course, the wife of the man that owned this huge ranch, she's taken, and
yes.
I mean, it was really, it's like I had to keep reading. I wanted to know what was going to happen.
And of course, she develops amnesia.
Yes,
from her from the battering that
right.
And she's desperate. She doesn't know, and this guy is telling her that she was his lover, and she can't believe that she could have been his lover, but she doesn't know because she can't remember. So, it's all interpolated there. And
did you have to do research on amnesia?
I did.
See, I was going to say, there was a lot of research that went into this. Yes. I got the feeling because, and also and this lawyer in Miami who is a scoundrel.
Yes.
And that's common, but
right.
But you really took us everywhere. You just took us across the.
Well, what happened was that I decided to do a trilogy, and so I created 3 bad guys and 1 good guy.
Oh, okay.
And so
I only met the 1 good guy so far.
Yes, and of course, something bad happens to one of the bad guys in the first book. And something bad will happen to the second guy in the second book, which is already written. And, of course, now I'm working on the third, which will be called The End of the Road. And that one, it has a more introspective veneer because I dwell for some of the main characters, I dwell a little bit deeper into their psycho. What made them be that way? And
well, that's good because a lot of us wonder. I always wonder why people do these crazy things and why they're so vicious and what did it come from their parents. But I want to tell everybody you're listening to Jorge Reyes S. And I want to ask you about that.
That's my mother's maiden name.
S.
Serrano.
Oh, but you use an S. I've never seen that done before. Okay.
Right,
Jorge G. Reyes S. He is the author of this very, very interesting, well, it's not interesting, it's exciting book. It's called Justified Retribution. Justified, that means, of course, and I looked up the word justified and I looked up the word retribution when I was starting to review this because those are pretty powerful words. Yes. And if it's justified, it's got to really have some powerful reasons. And then retribution, we all know, we're going to get you back for what you did, right?
Exactly.
So the book, and then, of course, you've got this gun on the front, which is a little frightening. But then you have the little child there, and it's pretty. You know, and I want to tell you something. Whatever paper you're using on your cover is beautiful. I don't know what that is. It's special.
Right. Well, actually, I have to thank the folks from Amazon who did the material. The artwork on the first book was done by a friend of mine who owns an arts. He's in the media business. He's actually more into the music business. He's got he's extremely talented actually, but basically the company's name Elastic People, and they work with artists and singers, and he does a lot of productions and advertising for these artists.
So he helped you.
So he basically created that
right.
the front, and then the rest was mine. The second one was actually, I didn't want to take advantage of his friendship, so I had this one done by another firm. He was angry with me when I told him.
Oh, because he wanted you to use him. But let me tell people, listen, this is a book that if you're bored with your life, get the book, and it'll keep you busy for probably a few days at least. It's a very good book, and I really hope you will buy it. It's Let's Get You There. You can actually go to we're going to go to a website. What website should we go to?
Well, you can actually find them in Amazon.com.
Okay, let's do that.
In the book section.
Yeah, let's go to Amazon.com.
Of course, you can go to my
Facebook page.
Page.
It's a little bit more confusing. I want people to buy this.
Right.
Go to Amazon.com, look up Jorge, Jorge, and it's G, Reyes, Reyes. Then there's an S by itself. He's the author, and it is it is going to tell you about what bad guys do. Because a lot of us, I never get involved with bad guys, thank goodness. But some of them were horrible.
The production of the cocaine, it's a very interesting process. First of all, the plant can be harvested. It's wild, and you can plant it in just about any terrain. If it's the desert, if it's wet, if it's muddy, if it's high, if it's low altitude, it makes no difference. It will grow. So it's a very, very inexpensive plant to produce and harvest. Again, you take the work of the peasants in the region, in Colombia and some of the other places, and they're very inexpensive. They work for $1 or $2 a day. So you take the coca leaves and you go through the process of taking the wax out of them. You dry them, then you do another process with alcohol or gasoline, which obviously you imagine that stuff is going to go into someone's brain eventually. And very interesting. I really didn't know what the price of a kilo, or equivalent of basically almost 2 pounds. And so I went about could I find out? Well, luckily enough, my son works for one of the departments of the federal government that is related to
tobacco and that whole.
Well, I don't want to reveal what department he is, but let's say that is one of those.
So he has to know what that is.
I said, "Can you find out for me through your contacts what a kilo of coke sells for on the street?" And when he called me back, I was like, "I don't believe this." It was like $30,000-$40,000. So then, because it's in one of the books, Can't remember if it's in this one or The Road to Redemption, which is the second book, but I think it's there. This man had taken barrels of oil, put the bags, 2-kilo bags of cocaine inside the barrels. Then he would, about 2/3 of the barrel will be filled. He would then put a false top and solder it, and then fill the 1/3 of the top with gasoline or oil. And when you would open and you smell, that's what was there. Well, underneath that was all that coke. And when I did my mathematical calculations of how many pounds of powder basically could fill 2/3 of an oil barrel, I came out with an astronomical sum, because each barrel, if I remember correctly, you could probably have about $4 or $5 million in just one barrel.
And so that's why it's such a big industry, and why
Yes.
everyone murders people, but they don't care. They live this big life, and and so that's really foreign to me, because I don't know any of this.
But it is.
But you were able to really keep the good guy safe. I mean, he never, he was smart. He was angry.
Yes, he was
he was going to find out what it was. Well,
Yes.
we're going to have you back again, Jorge, because, and maybe then we can talk about your other book, but we really appreciate your coming in. And I can just tell people, buy the book, Justified Retribution by Jorge Reyes, Reyes. Go to Amazon.com. It'll really fill days and nights, and you'll know a lot more, but it's really well done, and we thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for having me here today.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Thank you.